it's a decent practice anyway. Just have an end line. So notice that the warn, unlike the so if I do console.log, it's just going to log normally. If I do .warn and the console, it's going to have a little hazard sign there. It's going to be yellow. If I do console.error, it'll be red. There's probably a few more, but those are the three that I generally see. I'll do console. Cool, so how can we print a string? There. So notice I'm doing a keyword var here. You can also do let, not same var. And we're going to say, yes, thank you. Okay, interesting. It was not. It's because I reran the block. I just find it more interesting that it gave me the error than anything else. Cool. So this is just console logging out these values. This should seem pretty normal to you. We'll now look. We'll be like, okay, well, how do we do string interpolation like we did in Python? So we'll look up JS, string interpolation, and we'll find template literals, which are very nice. You can do this. I don't know what that character is called. It's in the same button as the tilde. Tick mark. Okay, backtick. Thank you. And so very similar to in Python where you're doing the curly brackets, you can do $ curly brackets in your template literals. So now we'll say, oh, okay. We'll say this is how you say, well. Right, and we can see that function's pretty much almost exactly the same as an F string. We just went over variables.
Did you show them all the different types?
Yeah, we're going to do that under here. So let's see all the ways we can. Let's see. Oh. That's interesting. Notice that the comma put an automatic space there. Jake, am I missing any? Oh, did you mean types as in variable types or ways of print?
Like strings, booleans.
Yes.
JavaScript numbers are different.
I mean, JavaScript is also dynamic typing, so not much is going to change there. Woo. We have, let's see if it's lowercase. No, I think it is lowercase in this. Yeah. So we've got we have a float, or actually in JavaScript, I don't believe there's a float. There is a number type instead. I don't think there is. Yeah, so rather than have a integer and a float like you're probably familiar with in Python, instead JavaScript just has one, which is a number. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, excellent question. So in JavaScript there are, and I'll drop this in. Yeah, that's fine. So JavaScript typing is, how best to put this? I would say a nightmare in general.
He's not
Actually, there's a great table that I
with the
table of quality JavaScript. Yes. Okay. I'm actually not going to spend too much time covering the quirks of JavaScript's type system. I will just leave you with essentially what you need to know is that JavaScript has a lot of quirky things that aren't really consistent, such as if you're doing a double equals, you have an empty string equal to string 0, it's false. If you have a 0 equal to an empty string, it's true. But if you have a 0 equal to a string of 0, it's also true, which is an interesting use of the idea of equality.
JavaScript has this idea of coercive types. Double equals means JavaScript will try to convert it for you to the same type. So remember how you were doing the int around your input for your Python or scripts? Double equals just does all that for you. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not.
Yeah. So the difference, as Jake put it, is that with the triple equals, no type conversion takes place. Right, which you're going to want to use. Excuse me? Yes, exactly. So it's the same as it is not setting right. It's just more of if we do. So notice here, it's true, right? Because it's a conversion. Oh, so handy. And the second one is false, as it probably should be, because they're not the same type. So I would just recommend sticking to triple equals unless you have a very good reason not to, for any type of comparison you're doing. And I will drop. If you were feeling brave. That looks good. I'll read that. There. This is on the number. Oh, all the way around, didn't I? And here's the comparison table. A lot of people really dislike JavaScript because of its typing. Yeah, but I found like I generally, and I haven't built as much in JavaScript as I have in Python, but I haven't really run into too many problems as with its typing in particular. Cool. Let's do some arithmetic. This is going to be pretty standard. Just kidding. Because I forgot. Anyone notice something interesting, an interesting difference between JavaScript and Python when it comes to division? Python turns it into a float, and JavaScript doesn't do that for what reason? Because it has no float. Only has number. Yep.
And that is 8 divided by 2 in JavaScript always 4.
I'm sure I could figure out a way to make it not.
The reason I bring that up is if you divide in JavaScript, you can never be certain that it's actually a whole number. Ever. You might get 4.00000001 on occasion. So if you're ever dividing, you should always floor it or round it. JavaScript is just not safe.
That is not the... Wow, I have to use the math library. Lame. Okay. All right, so notice we can't do the double asterisks like in Python. We have to bring in JavaScript's math library. If we want to follow Jake's sage wisdom, we can also do or over here to keep that consistent. Although it's not going to, here I can do it with 0.1 so you can see what that does. Just kidding. Yeah. Who here can tell me what floor does? Yes. Gosh. Darn it. Oh, isn't it I before E except after C? Classic. Except there are more exceptions to that rule than things that follow it. Okay. Cool. So let's say go to 1, say if. Someone tell me if this will print. Why? Yes. And they're of different types. Will this print? Come on, guys. I don't know where those dots are coming from, but I'm gonna roll with it. Cool. Yeah. So, Sean, you may have not been in here when we covered this.
Yeah, the triple is equivalent.
Yes.
And then
So 2 is going to try to convert the type if it can.
okay.
Triple equal will just compare. And it will not set it. It will not say they're equal if they're not the same type, right?
So you're saying you can't convert from the numbers to the character?
Oh, no, you 100% can with the double equals. So like if I do this, it's going to print, right? But this 1, which is a number, is well, actually, I'm assuming actually this one is probably being converted. I'm not sure which one JavaScript is going to convert. Jake, do you know?
I think the right one is converted,
Alright.
I can't say for certain.
Yeah.
So in JavaScript you can't cast like you can in Python.
No, you.
No, it's not like casting the double equals a cast.
No. Here, let me demonstrate casting. I think I can literally just say number here.
Is that gonna be safer than using double equals?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
The only reason we covered the double equal, like I was actually just going to show you the triple equals, but somebody asked, and I was like, oh, okay, now we need to go into it. But I was going to be like, just triple equals is double equals. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain.
Also very important, notice you put number and not new number. You'll see in some developer docs, when you hear if you're converting between types, please don't do that. It will break things and you won't know why.
It definitely just did. Ooh, collections. So let's, first things first. Now what? It's gonna have 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool. So we have a list here. Length. Console log it. It's interesting that the implicit return of the IPython notebook doesn't work with this. Cool. Let's iterate through it. I can do 4 of each. I thought about doing the C++ style for loops, and I was like, I know, just for you. And actually, I won't do that yet, because I want to introduce those later.
I don't think that'll work.
It will not.
Just passing console log with that. And what you're passing in the console log is the 3 arguments you give for each.
That should have. Oh, because I didn't make a temp because I didn't. Okay, well, I'll just do it this way. This is one way of instantiating a function in JavaScript. Might be sort of weird that we're doing it. Yes.
See that you're using a class method on that array. Are arrays and variables by default classes?
Yes. Here an array is definitely an object.
Oh, yeah, everything in JavaScript is an object.
Whether or not it's a class is an interesting question. So JavaScript does have classes, but I'm pretty sure classes are just placeholders for prototypes.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. So JavaScript has another way of creating objects. Essentially, if I do like this,
An object is a picture game.
yes, this is an object. And you know what else I can do? I can say, let's make our, let's see, what do we want to make? Let's say make our greeter. And we'll have like hey count is 0. And we'll have say hey. And we'll have that be a function. Let me format this a little bit. That console logs hey, and then thank you. And I need to get hey counts there. Can I say this? Yes, no.
This might be a little weird, but remove the function keyword and remove the colon.
want to do this in the node one here for some reason was having all sorts of, like Roth was getting errors in there that weren't in the console, so I want to test it in a JS bin. Not the same. Okay. HTML. Woo. Excuse me? Like this? Well, that would be what we had originally. But I would believe that. Let's see if we can do that. Do we have greeter? Yes. When I say greeter, say hey. Can I call it? Yes. Hey count is 1. Right, so this is essentially running as a object, right? So we defined a method, say hey here. See our function there. We have this count. This is going to be very similar to self in Python. I'm sure that analogy will break at some point, but that's where we'll start you. We're console logging hey, and notice that when I ran it, it said hey, returned undefined. So let's return the hey count. Greeter say hey. Oh. Hey count was not defined. Wow, I just had crazy deja vu. Cool, so console log hey, output it 1. So it's a little bit wonky, but that's a JavaScript object. When you are typing class in JavaScript, just know that it's a lie. This is what's happening. Are there any questions on anything we've covered?
So like how do you not create like new objects? How do you create new objects?
You don't. Oh, as far as like actually using the class keyword, or
Just create new objects like.
that was a new object. So this greeter right there is an object. It's a new object.
So you don't create new objects, you have to still like copy the same code.
Oh, you mean like how do we make new instances of greeter? I see. Ooh, I usually do use the prototype syntax for that.
If you want to use prototype syntax, new object. New object is a weird concept. If you want to use class-based, define the class.
Can I do it directly with the hash like that? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'll define a function greeter. Notice here it's just this is just setting everything. I think ours will still be fine. So net. Where are you net? And it's a function now, so it's there. Yeah. Thank you. So we have a function. Yeah. And now I should be able to say greet me. Yeah, I would like to have good practices here. There you go. And that's hilarious. So you can see here that it's outputting our new object greeter. Right here with hey count and say hey. So I can say, let me remove that, there's no reason. Let me do, so I made one called greet me. So it's like, I can say greet me, say hey. Yes? Yes. Yeah, essentially everything in so Python and JavaScript are similar in that they both really JavaScript more so is more functional at its core, but Python does support functional programming, right, via the fact that functions are what's called first-order objects, meaning you can pass a function around, you can take a class and you can like shove a function into it, you can manipulate functions, you can have functions in functions, you can return functions, you can do something called a closure, which is where you have a function that outputs another function that has a value already set in it. So I could do something like function say hey, and it returns. Oh, first we have greet text equals what's up. And it returns another function that's just console log greet text. So notice that this right here returned a function, and now if I run that function, it'll console log what's up. Yes? No, because yeah, I see why that is very confusing.
Actually, I'm surprised there's no like var greet text or let greet text.
Oh, JavaScript standards are made up. Low key. But yeah, we can do would also run.
Oh, actually, I'd be curious if you remove the var, can you see if the text is on the global object?
That's a so you
That's what it is.
so do you want me to print it right here?
Yeah.
No, greet text is not defined. No, it's still inside the variable scope. I remember when JavaScript introduced like, oh, now you have to say var and let everywhere. It used to just be like Python, and sometimes it still works that way. Sometimes it depends on your interpreter, which is really not great. But okay, but your question is why do we not have to say this? And that's an awesome question. I think it's just because we're not really treating this as an object. So if we set this greet text to here, I am pretty certain that will not work now. So say hey. Wait, but it could be that it was already defined in memory. Let me change it to just greet. Okay, there are no rules. All right. Well, as a best practice, when you're treating it as a class, or rather an object, because there are no classes here, except for when there are.
Can you show them just a class of like reader too, just so they understand?
Yeah. So we can define a class greeter. I want the documentation. I want yeah.
Why don't you just try returning greet instead of returning console log greet? I think that's what I was executing inside the closure. This way, if you try to console log say hey, it's going to give you an undefined error. It's because greet is defined inside the closure of the function say hey. And when you called it previously, you were actually executing the console log inside the context of that closure. Now you're returning just
Return,
greet,
I see.
which is undefined once you get outside of the closure.
Say hey is not defined. No, but the issue here is that say hey is not defined. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so because if it's working by side effect, then it will work. Yeah, that's a very good point. How do I
This is
boil
sort of
that
an
down?
introduction to callback hell and closures in JavaScript.
Yeah. It's a little more complex than we're going to. So essentially, the point that he's making is when we're doing the console.log, we were doing something by side effect. So it's actually the way that a closure works is or what it takes advantage of is the fact that it's still in the same namespace as its parent function. So you have access to all of the variables that were defined in your parent function. And if you're apparently in JavaScript, if you're using those by side effects, that's fine. But if you go to return them, it's going to return undefined, and it's going to break. So essentially, if you want to, like, if we try return greet, this should error. I think it actually. No. I'll look more into it. Closures are more complicated than you're generally going to have to use. They're just a cool programming language feature. But I'll go and look into this a bit more and make a clear answer. Because Wes, it returns greet as well. It autos. I can run JS. But I mean, if I do this, we can see the function is return greet. Yeah.
And if you just hit one parenthesis, what do you get?
You're going to get back the function. So whether or not it's some JS-bin caching that's going on, whether or not it's like JavaScript closure weirdness, we're going to move on.
Yeah, well, this is exactly right, because what you're doing is returning a function.
Mm-hmm.
Here you're returning a function, and the function creates a closure.
Yes,
The whole
I
thing
agree.
about in JavaScript, everything is lexically scoped. So if you have it inside a function, it's going to operate as you think. If you say, if you assign, say, hey to a variable, let's say you say, my bar equals say hey and call it. Then you can invoke my bar and it'll return greet. It's because you're returning a function.
Mm-hmm.
The function is capturing the scope of
yes.
the definition of greet inside that function.
Yes.
But if you just return greet, it's going to be undefined outside of the scope.
The reason it's returning defined is because whenever are looking for a variable in JavaScript, it will climb up the code type chain.
Yeah, I think.
And so it's finding.
So we're returning. That doesn't make any sense. That
Surprising because
I really think it's JS-bin. Yeah, let's pull the plug on that one and go to classes. So you're never gonna have to do this, but
You will see the end that does.
will they? Yeah, no, certainly. Oof. What do you not like? Oh, sorry. Oh, it's only available in ES6. What one are you running? Also, important thing to note. So, JavaScript, unlike Python, we don't have the advantage of it being as mature as a language. So there are a lot of different versions out there. There are a lot of different versions of React frameworks, of JavaScript frameworks, such as React. For example, what we're teaching you using hooks in React is very modern. Jake, when did it come out? Like 6 months ago?
Yeah, it hasn't been a year yet.
Yeah. Django has remained, I learned Django 5 years ago now, and I didn't review Django before last week. Like I came in and it was the same. Everything was the same. I learned React a year and a half ago, and React changed within 3 months of me learning it. I then relearned it, and it changed again. So it's gonna be a faster, yes.
Why stick with React as opposed to Vue?
Because React offers some, the bargain does come at a price, but it's a good bargain to make. React offers a lot of power that we're not gonna see in Django. We're gonna see later how easy it is to build really cool, very slick, responsive, and essentially apps with state. So the advantage of React over something like Django is that Django, anytime you have state, meaning your application someone is logged in, or anytime you have data that's consistently being stored on the page, it's being mocked, right? There's no HTTP by default, and thus any backend is going to be stateless, right? So since that is stateless, it makes it harder for you to build certain types of applications. And we're going to go further into that as the week progresses. So I think your question will be answered. I think you'll have the answer to your question by the end of the week. Or you could just ask Jake. Greet message undefined. So we defined a greet message. Now I can say I. Okay. So this is the class syntax. We're going to stick with function for everything, because everything that but it's actually not going to look like this, because in not React, in JavaScript, you can also define a function another way that's really, really cool, and I really like. It's one of my favorite things. It looks just so cool. So we can say const. We'll say hey 3. We'll say equal to. So notice this is way different. I'm setting a constant. What are you yelling at? We are in ES6. Calm down. Setting a constant equal to a temporary or anonymous function. And then I'm doing this weird fat arrow syntax. And I can do stuff in here. Let's say greet message. So I can run that. Oh, auto run is on. Cool. Let's say hey 3. Oh, undefined. Oh. Cool. And let's return 1, so you can see what that looks like when it happens. Cool. So this is just a very it's just a different syntax for defining a function in JavaScript that you're going to see quite a bit. It's way more concise, and you can we're going to use these temporary functions everywhere, right? Because remember that although Python does have some functional elements to it, JavaScript is way more of a functional programming language. And what that means is that you're going to be passing functions, you're going to be using anonymous functions way more, you're going to be making lists of functions and executing them. Everything is going to be using a function, and it's going to be using it in a different way than you probably have in the past.
One very important thing, you saw we were using the list keyword for instances of objects, right? The arrow function
thought that it just inherited this keyword from the.
You're right.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
inherited from the other script, so you
I
did
don't
that.
want to go into that yet,
You're right.
but we're gonna go into it.
If you're wondering why this breaks, check whether you're using function array.
Yes. But I think that's easier to cover when we get into React. Cool. Let's do some while loops. While true. Nope, that's Python. I should probably actually not do an infinite loop. So we're gonna say we're gonna say when x is less than 2, so x plus. Cool. So well, let me actually set that something higher. So this is going to work for those of you who have written C or C++. Welcome. This is pretty much going to be the same syntax for most of JavaScript when it comes to loops, when it comes to, well, you don't set the type on variables unless you're using something called TypeScript, which if you want to look up in your own time, it's really cool. I like it. All of that is going to be pretty similar. Let's do just for, I bet I can do that. 0, x is 10, and x plus. And actually, something that is nice in JavaScript is if we do, yeah. So in Python, we did not have the plus plus, which is super lame. But we do have that in JavaScript. Cool. So that should be very similar to anyone who's written C, C++, Java, probably some other languages. And so there is this for loop, and there is this while loop. I encourage you to never use it. Like, there is no real reason in JavaScript to ever be doing such a thing. And if you think you have a really good reason, come up and we can talk about it. Because you almost certainly don't. Instead, we're going to use tons of cool things like map. So we're going to set a, let's make a collection here. 0, 1, 2, 3. And you saw us do each a second ago. We can also do, how similar actually are for loop, for each and map?
Oh, they're exactly the same on the map.
Yeah, so map is essentially this equivalent to a list comprehension. Cool. Undefined. So let's make a, so what we're going to do in here is we're, inside of our map, we're going to make a temporary function. We're going to, no, I actually don't want that. We're just going to look up .map JavaScript MDN. We're going to get the Mozilla documentation on map. We're going to go down to, ooh. No, not the map object. No. Yes, thank you. Ooh, notice something here. With the fat arrow syntax, you can actually just do, you don't even have to do the parentheses. There's other forms of that syntax that are way cleaner. So say we want to, we'll just say value. We'll just console log it for now. right? And then, but we're also going to return value plus 1. And what do we notice at the very end? What does map return? Excuse me? 4. It returns 4. Yes, it returns a new list. That is the return values of whatever we did before. So can someone from this side of the room tell me how I could have, in this list, how could I have hey be the value for every single element in this list by changing this map function? From this side of the room. So here we have map. What map is doing is it's passing in the value of each one as it iterates over, just like a list comprehension. We then have a temporary function where we pass in the value. Then we define our function here. We're console logging that value, and then we're returning that value plus 1. So that value plus 1, it goes through, it's like 0, and then it comes down here, becomes 1. Goes 3 to 2, gets plus 1, becomes 2. 3, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. And it just appends those on, just like a list comprehension. So if you want to see the equivalent, we can just do print for 0, 1, 2, 3. That. Wow, what a punk. Cool. And notice if we print range before that, it's actually not quite the equivalent. The equivalent would be more of, I think we can probably define a lambda here. X, and we'll say print x, and we'll say return x plus 1. Oof. I'm forgetting how I can do a lambda inline like that. Yes? Well, so we could say values equal to hey. Like that? Yeah, that would totally work. We could also just do hey. Cool. Yes? Or for a while loop. One, I believe. So I think that it's more intuitive if you have a collection to be doing something that is iterating directly through that collection as opposed to indirectly, such as through an index. So anytime you're doing a while or for, you have to have a counter of some type, and you're indexing that, which I think is less intuitive. Number two, I think this syntax for most people that write JavaScript is going to become way easier to read and faster to write. Yes, or list comprehension. I would say they're the closest to a list comprehension in Python. List comprehension is what I wrote up here, where it's basic. So it's funny because in Python, a map and a wow. That is such garbage, Python. You gonna do me like that? There is no way. The type of that x is 100% an integer. Why are you treating it like a string? Oh, I am losing my mind. I am losing my mind. Okay. There was an x defined as a string somewhere up there. And it was concatenating. Cool. So in Python, a list comprehension and a map actually are exactly the same, except that a map is a generator. meaning that it's lazily evaluated, which means you can like define it and then pass it to wherever you want, and it will be evaluated just when it's used, right? So the ideas of a map and a list comprehension are very, very close, right? And that analogy, I'm sure, will break at some point, but again, it's a good starting point. Our goal here is to sort of leverage your Python knowledge as we go into JavaScript, right? The more programming languages you learn, the less it's going to be about a particular language, and the more it will be about language features, right? So when I go to learn a new language, I don't go like, okay, what does the syntax of this look like? I go, okay, what are the language features that it has, and what are the programming paradigms that it uses, right? And then from there, I know, okay, well, this is probably how they want me to write this, knowing how this paradigm is implemented in other languages. Cool. More for loops. Here's a list comprehension. It's not useful to us. We just went over functions already. We went over objects. Okay, promises. Let's do this.
Oh, just a reminder, in JavaScript, lists are called arrays and dictionaries are called objects. So when you're doodling and Stack Overflow.
Yes. Yes, Sean. Or are you scratching your head? What do you have? Do you have any questions? Well, let me know. Cool. So, you guys are probably wondering at this point, okay, so JavaScript has garbage typing. It's got this weird syntax. Their classes are functions. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Two very good reasons. One, it is the only language you can write in the browser. So, no avoiding it. Number two, JavaScript is, I can't, there are probably some languages out there that do it better, but I don't think I've had the pleasure of writing a language that handles asynchronous and like event-driven programming as well as JavaScript does, right? So JavaScript is designed for being able to handle asynchronous stuff in a very intuitive way. And yeah, so asynchronous is, you can think of it to start off with as a parallel process, right? So essentially it's just like I can take one process, say I'm just summing some numbers and over an array, and I have another array and I'm summing some numbers, and I can run them at the same time, right? And whenever they're done, they're each going to just tell me that they've finished. So what that allows me to do is now I can define behavior. I can say, okay, when this array is done, right, go do this with it, with that computation. When this array is done, go do this with that computation, right? So as opposed to programming and the flow of your logic is just the flow of lines, now what we can do is we can set up computations that will complete in their own time, right? And that's going to help us from an efficient, yes?
What's doing that process?
I'm going to show you after I explain the concept. No worries. Thank you for your question. So as opposed to being purely procedural, right, just going through line by line, now we can do things like say, okay, well, it takes 2 minutes for us to get data from the server, and I don't want the page to be just sitting there. I don't want the page to be sitting there waiting to load, right? So I can go ahead and load in the page and do a call to the server, and when the server decides to get data back to me, then I'll have it, right? And that process is happening in parallel to everything else. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the fine details of how parallel programming is done at lower levels, JavaScript is not actually doing parallel programming, it is simulating it. So if someone wants to come up to me and tell me how JavaScript is not multi-threaded, you can save your time. I'm looking at you, Raf. Cool. So we have, and one of the structures JavaScript gives us to handle asynchronous behavior is called a promise. A promise is exactly as it sounds. It's essentially a promise that some computation will be tried. I think let's actually switch to Rolf's lecture on this. Cool. Did you just update it? I'm glad I got a chance to look over it. I'll adapt. Oh, so import pixie dust. That makes sense. Okay, so right before we get into promises, callbacks. I guess I technically it's a callback. So here we're just defining a function that says console log hello. We're doing set timeout. We're setting the timeout to 2 seconds. So that's 2,000 milliseconds. And then we're passing in the function that we want called every 2 seconds. So if I do this, every 2 seconds we should see hello.
No, just the first time. Yeah. 7 is every 2 seconds.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. I had the cellular automata thing in my head. Yeah. I want to see 7 in mobile. No, I don't. That might break it. Cool. So a promise is essentially an object, right? So we're going to set promise1 equal to a new promise. Notice that we're then defining a function in here that accepts resolve and reject. The promise is going to pass in resolve and reject, right, which are just 2 different functions. And that's sort of how we're going to manage our promise behavior. So who can tell me what they think resolve might do if we call it? Guesses. Who can tell me what reject might do? Yeah. So resolve is essentially going to be for a successful case. Reject is essentially going to be for any errors that occur, right? So if somebody makes a promise and they agree to it, they're going to have resolve. They're going to resolve that promise, right? That's a successful case. If they don't agree to it, right, there's an error, they're going to reject the promise. So here we're setting a timeout. So it's going to run after 1 second. It's going to say timeout done. It's then going to resolve hello world, right? So in 1 second, this promise will resolve with the value of hello world, right? So let's go off the rails here. That is not the commenting I want. Okay, I'll put you in a new. Because I want to console log the promise. Okay. So we console log our promise immediately after creating it. What should not be surprising to us? In any other, if this was not a promise, it would have immediately returned hello world, right? But since it's a promise, when we printed it immediately after, what we got was this object, right? And something you might notice here is pending. Yes. What is the what? It's making, so promise is an object. So we're just making a new promise object. Yes. Ooh. Yes, do it. If you figure out a way around it, let me know. And I want to show you guys the promise lifecycle, which I have down here. Okay. So we noticed that promise was pending, right? meaning it just hasn't been fulfilled yet. So we're like, okay, that's fine, that's fine. But how do we know when they have fulfilled it, right? What essentially we want to do is we want to define some behavior that when the promise has been fulfilled, that behavior will run, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say promise 1, so we set up here, and we're going to say dot then. And we're going to say, okay, whatever value that promise returns back should be here, and we're just going to console log what the promise says. And I am going to grab this because I don't want to cover the rest of that yet. So cool. So our then worked. So our promise evaluated after a second. Our then went, hey, here's the value. So the promise was pending. It was fulfilled. On fulfillment, the then was called. The promise reached a state of settled. It then returned. Oh, well, this is showing chaining. But in our case, it just returned a value and we console logged it. Cool. Okay, so what happens now if things don't go well? Promises that were made are broken, and we have to be able to handle that. Like what if, for example, this said reject, and it said there is no. What's going to happen? Oh, unhandled promise rejection warning. Okay, well, so we define the case for if it's successful, but we haven't defined the case for if it's rejected, right? Meaning failure. So we'll go here and we'll say, well, people who made this are pretty smart. I bet that as the second function here is just going to be my failure case. So we'll actually change that from value to error. And I want to handle that error because I don't want my program breaking, and I want to console log it, see what it is. Timeout done, there is no world. Wow. I like the timeout done. Right, so if we change this to resolve, actually let's right, then we're going to see promise says hello world. We can say error. Notice that our error case does not happen. Right? Something else cool about promises, you can chain them. As we're going to see, oh, there's no, I would really like to do a set timeout. Can I just do that? That's hilarious. Oh, it's because he called resolve up. Well, no, I didn't realize that I didn't see the resolve he called up here, so I thought we would have to say resolve in there. But I'm actually going to change that because I want to do.
You still have to do new promise and pass in resolve again.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm changing his example too much. We'll just stick with what it's meant to show. Okay, so what this is meant to show you is that you can chain then. Right. So we have our first print, we have our second print, we have our third print, we have our fourth print. So I don't like that example, so I'm going to skip it. Cool. You can also do a chain of returns. So we can say a promise is resolved. It's then going to pass its return value. Notice that's an implicit return of a 1. It's going to pass down the value. We're going to say first print value. It's going to print here. We're then going to add 1 to it and keep going. So what is this going to print? So we start at 1. Print 1. Thank you. Now, very hard question. What is this going to print? Oh, wow. Now, for the whole burrito, what is this going to print? No, 4. 4. It was not a trick question. 5. 1, 2, 3. No, it's gonna print 4. Oh, it's actually very confusing. You know why? Because if this ran, then yes, it would. So the return value is 5. So let me. Can I console.log this whole thing? Oh, what a wank. So what can I do if I want to print that? No, not you, Jake. I'm asking on purpose.
One more than.
One more than? But we did thens before and it didn't end it.
No, I don't like it.
I like how print worked in here. That will not work in your browser. I'm going to just change that. That will go very poorly in your browser. Yes? No, not at all. This is not meant to differentiate between multiple cases, right? What this is meant to do is to essentially allow you to chain logic together. So you can say, hey, I have this action that's running in parallel. When it's done, do this, right? But then that action itself is also something that's running in parallel, asynchronously. So you can essentially just sort of chain behavior down, right? So in this case where you, yes?
I was going to ask why we use this alternatively function.
You would never do this. This is just an example. I'll show you, I'm going to get to more pragmatic, like when this is used when we start building some stuff in a second. Yeah, if I see this in your code, I'll be very perturbed. Yeah, so your intuition was right. It's just that this console log is right before our addition. Yeah. Oh. Yes. And then.
It's like in the code, right? Like it's a 1 there, but it didn't return the 1 anything. So.
You're saying right here. So that's something called an implicit return. So we can say return there, and it will. Maybe I need to define a function to return it. Oh, yes, Roth is 100% right. So it is not a implicit return. I was completely wrong. What it is, I think it's easier written as this. That makes it, I think, more sense. Because, so that 1 is an argument being passed into resolve, and what resolve does is essentially say, hey, this has been successful, here's your value. Right? So we're resolving that promise, and we're saying that the success value is 1, and then it's passing that to the then, which happens after success. Does that answer your question? Cool. Now the real question is, if I change this to reject.
Do you use that one that's the whole value? Would you use it for anything?
Wait, hold that because Stephen had a question.
What would a return value at the end be?
Here?
Yeah.
Continue the cycle. Yeah, it's literally, you can think of it as, it's saying, hey, this promise was resolved, and then, and then, and then. You should take then very literally in this case.
So even if there's not a then block after that?
No, so it will only continue as long as you're specifying behavior.
So there's no point to return statement if there wasn't a then block after that?
Yeah, like I could return it to the void, but it's not going anywhere.
And you can still do it then afterwards, even if there is no return, you just won't pass any data to the next round.
Reject was not handled. Question back there.
When you use like the resolve one, or what do you do anything to that value of one, or is that more just like a checking to make sure it's a success?
No, we quite literally use it, right? Because we say one, and then it passes down to here and comes value, and then we print it, we add one to it, and we pass it again.
But value is like a temporary variable, right?
Only by the virtue that it is part of a temporary function.
Can you do more than one value then in resolve and reject?
I don't think, like, I could probably do like a list. I could definitely return a list if I wanted multiple values. I don't think I can do like, but we'll find out right now. Let me change that to resolve. Oh, that's really sad. What if I did 1, 2, and then I did, would it automatically do that? Or is it gonna, yeah. I would need to say value list, and I'll just say value 2. Jake, do you know of an easier way to do this?
You still need your brackets on
What, even if I do this?
yeah, you don't want that. You want brackets.
Lame. Yeah, so if we wanted to pass multiple values, that's one way of doing it. I'll look and see if there's a more eloquent way of doing that. I don't really like that, but cool. Yes.
So make sure that arrow is a temporary function.
Fat arrow does not have to be a temporary, well, so it is a temporary function, but sometimes what we can do is we can say like, we can do something like this, where we can say const, say hey, is equal to, right? And thank you. Wow, IPython. You don't. Okay. Okay. So this is a temporary function. So it's only so temporary, right? Because we can set a const, say hey, equal to it, and which at that point it has a name, and it's not temporary.
Yeah.
But in most cases, yes.
And then for a promise, would you not, I've only seen us do one or the other resolve or reject.
You would have different cases.
Like when you like define a promise, like what you say, like this is what you do in resolve, this is what you do in reject.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, essentially. You want to use that as your, you should be handling, well, we didn't really do this in Python as much, mainly for time, but error handling is important. You should be handling your errors, and it's essentially a structure for you to do so. Any other questions? Cool. Let's keep going. Throw, danger, Will Robinson. Who's Will Robinson, Roth? Oh, okay. Wow. Wait, what'd you say? I'm sorry. I'll just go back to my code, not being a nerd. Cool, so what essentially we have here, we have a promise, just called promise. Essentially the other one is called promise one, this is called promise, but I'm not gonna go against it. So we define our function, resolve and rejects. Notice here it's not using the fed-in arrow syntax, that's okay. We're then gonna throw an error, danger Will Robinson. So, out of this block here, what's gonna print out? Looking at the console logs is not cheating. Well, that will definitely print out, but something else is gonna print out before that. Right in front of it. That will always print out. I want something before that, though. So we've thrown an error from our promise, right? So one of these says that an error has occurred. So that would probably be our best bet. But we look at this, so we're new to the code base. We're junior developers at this company. We're just looking at some senior devs code, and we're like, okay, catch. What in the world is that? But we're looking like, okay, well, it says an error occurred in there, and when I do a throw, what I bet is that this danger Will Robinson is going to bypass this then, and it's going to go straight to this catch. Because my guess is that catch is used to, instead, if you don't want to do the second argument of a then, you can specify catch on the chain, and it will catch any errors that have happened before it. But that's just a guess. Excellent point. It will skip any thens. Otherwise, it would console log success. Cool. So an error has occurred. Danger Will Robinson. And Quinlan made an excellent point that the finally, as you have here, will always run. Right? It's essentially something you can put into the end of your chain, which no matter what, if it was a catch, if it was thens, it will run at the end. What do I want to do? What can we do if I want to get a success message? How can we change this promise? Wow, your brilliance is unrivaled. Now we have nothing. What do we need to do? So this let's print out our promise. Surely it's done processing by now. Pending.
Yeah, that's in the resolve. That's in the resolve.
Oh, we need to pass the result. So how can I do that?
Get rid of the comment.
Nice. Right. So as Bo aptly pointed out, we need to comment on our error and have the resolve to say, hey, this went well. Otherwise, our promise will be forever pending. Cool. That is the end on the lecture on promises. Let's actually get to the fun stuff and build something. So, yeah. They're called asteroids. And so we're gonna get started with React. I'm gonna say npm install React, which, oh, actually I'm not gonna do that. That had a problem with hooks last time. I'm gonna say npm install React next. Get the latest version of React. Create React by default does not create a version that has hooks. So that's important to know. npx create dash react dash app, and we're going to call it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a quick little data sciencey thing that goes to NASA's API for asteroids, and it puts a bar chart of the asteroids that have been closest to Earth. So keeping with the
You get it from where?
NASA's API.
Like NASA, not the NASAgram, but NASA.
No, yeah, NASA has an API for asteroids that have been close to Earth. Yeah. So keeping with the there is no world theme.
No, there's no world. It just could be destroyed.
Excuse me? Thank you. Ooh. How's that?
What's NPX?
NPX is, it's not NP. What is NPX?
So npm is the version of, so you know how Python has pip? Node has npm, but npx is saying you don't have to install this thing globally, you can just run a command from it.
Okay. Essentially, for our purposes, it's a command line tool. That I believe comes installed with npm. Yes. And we'll say, yeah. Yes, I did. So what we're going to do, create React app, asteroids. It's going to take a second. Hopefully NASA has reset my API quota, because use effect before I added that second argument really got me.
I maxed out 4 or 5 API keys the other day.
Yes.
I have all of the software
Yeah.
How do you discriminate when to build something on the front end versus doing it on the back end?
First question is, do I need to store data? Next question is, how intensive a computation do I need to do? Depending on those two questions, I would figure out the third question. So the first one, if I need to store data, if I do it on the front end, I need to have some type of back end idea, right? Or do something really sketchy, like store it in a flat file.
So if you like wanted to, like if you were doing just like a date picker, you put that on the front end?
Yeah, totally. Right. But say you are like anything that stores data has to have a backend, but it can be like Firebase or something like that, where it's not really like you don't have to build the backend. You can just interact with it.
Yeah. So like put code in Firebase?
No. So Firebase actually just has like code pre-written for you to just save data there. It's basically just a database that you can use. Excuse me? Yeah. Looks are deceiving. Cool. So that's. That's super weird. It didn't create that by default. Oh, okay. We're going to say npm start. There we go. Hopefully it doesn't have that load time all the time. Is everyone at this page, aside from Houston? You're also having an error? Roth. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take 15 minutes and we're going to
weirdly sit in the stall, like a towel, but I realized you don't have to do that. I was a mistake. Make sure I would say, oh, you're happy. You should hear because I think that's the wrong way. Yeah, so sometimes on the information stuff, and that's the case of just getting CH bond on the top directly, or if it's then let's see if we have a case like that now. And we have that, right? So that command is installed, so you don't have to do anything. And then if you could spell escalates for me. And actually, if you go to your camera, Yeah, okay, so it's starting to develop in server, and eventually it will actually, it'll just go. Yeah, so now that it's ready, you can go back to your browser. Then go to folder. Yeah. Let's see if that works. Wait. See that?
I wouldn't mess with it though at this point. What are you done with all the backend stuff?
Yeah, all we're doing is gonna make that call.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I guess that's good. But there's also
Yeah, I want. I mean,
you got an idea about when you
no, like not. I do sort of. We need to talk about it. What? Yeah.